The Douglas Coleman Show is made possible with support from Seth David Radwell, a recent guest on the program and author of American Schism, How the Two Enlightenments Hold the Secret to Healing Our Nation, released this past July. As Publishers Weekly writes in its recent glowing book life review of American Schism, business executive Radwell's epic debut examines the historical influences that have led to what he sees as the collapse of politics in the United States. Seth Radwell makes the case that the current chasm between the American right and left can be traced back to the 18th century's Age of Enlightenment and the basic tenets of liberty, equality, and reason. American Schism provides a historical perspective that can help us fight today's unreason with reason and bridge current-day divides. American Schism by Seth David Radwell is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. For more information, go to AmericanSchismBook.com.
It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Reverend Karen Herrick, Ph.D. Hello, Karen. How are you?
I'm good, Doug. Thank you so much. How are you?
Oh, doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. The first
line... I love being on. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. The first line in your bio kind of hits home for me. Says, is the director of the Center for Children of Alcoholics, Inc., and
yes.
Yeah, I grew up with an alcoholic father who, in the end, kicked it. But this was back in the early 1970s, before the Betty Ford, before pretty much any kind of rehab. I remember he had to go to the hospital to get sober, you know, and
yes.
They put him on various kinds of drugs. I think lithium was one of the drugs he was taking for a while to get sober. Yeah.
So, and my father was alcoholic also.
Okay. So I mean, a lot has changed since those days, yeah. What exactly does your center do? I mean, what would you do for children of alcoholics?
Well, I don't work so much with children of alcoholics anymore. When I started, it was in the late 70s. And they didn't have programs in schools for children of alcoholics then, and now they do. And they, teachers teach about alcohol in the home and drug use and that kind of stuff. And they actually have groups in kids, at least in New Jersey. And one of my first jobs was in a small town in New Jersey where I put a drug and alcohol curriculum in the school K through 8 and help the teachers teach good drugs, bad drugs, that kind of stuff. So now, mostly, and I'm semi-retired now because I've been working for over 35 years, and I teach on the internet, and I've just done an alcohol, actually a little YouTube. I think it's part 1, part 2. Might even be part 3. I can't remember. My Prevagen isn't working today too well. But I did a YouTube on alcohol and what is alcoholism, and I thought it might be nice to have it out there free for people, who are really having a problem. But you're right. Now there's so much more education about alcohol, and, people, have a designated driver when they go out and that kind of stuff. So we've come a long way.
As I remember, AA was just sort of in its infancy when he was in the process of getting sober. And I know that he went to meetings.
Right.
And people, now I'm remembering things that were happening when I was like 10 years old, but people would come to the house and they would have, a lot of coffee and cigarettes, and there would be groups in our living room. I just remember as a kid walking through and all these strange people are in the house. And it was very interesting. The one thing I suppose that I was fortunate about with my father is that he was not an abusive man. So when he got drunk, he was very quiet. He was very reserved. He was, I don't want to say he was a happy drunk. I mean, I've seen people like that, but he was just, he would go into his own space, but he would be so far gone that you couldn't have a conversation with him. He would just be sort of off in Spaceland somewhere when he got drunk. And I know a lot of kids that grew up with alcoholic parents who were abusive, who were violent. Yes. And certainly that would be much more traumatic for children, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were growing up in these homes, now, in the 1980s was when the adult child of alcoholic movement really got big in the United States. And what that meant was that there were certain people that were raised in an alcoholic family that didn't want to go to Al-Anon and say, I'm still powerless over alcohol. That's the first step, right? I'm not powerless over alcohol now. So they started their own movement, which Al-Anon eventually did adult children of alcoholic meetings also. But for 2 years, there's just these people that decided they were going to meet together and talk about living in an alcoholic home. And it started, of course, in California and then grew all around the country. But one of the things that they discuss that I think is important is that we take on certain roles when we live in these families. And then people started coming in and saying, well, we had those roles in our family, but my father wasn't an alcoholic, or mother. Okay, well, then it was a dysfunctional family where, and the definition for that is that your emotional needs were not met. So mom and dad was busy working, mom was busy doing something, and, we just kind of grew up by ourselves, and there are varying degrees of that. But in these families that are dysfunctional and or alcoholic, we have roles that kids take on. So that, and this is how it generally goes. It doesn't always, have to go this way, but the oldest is usually the hero, or the overly responsible kid, and they get good grades or they do well in sports, and they bring pride to the family. And then the second child is sometimes called the scapegoat, and that's the problem child. And they have a lot of anger, and they act out and, cause trouble. And if the parents come in for therapy, that's the kid they bring in and say, we can't do anything with this kid. And sometimes that child will act out just to stop the arguing between mom and dad, because there's usually, if your dad was quiet, maybe you didn't have that in your house, but there's usually a lot of arguing going on in an alcoholic home. And then the third child, the role is the lost child, quiet, shy, and sensitive. And they spend a lot of time in their room, more introverted. They like to read, and they follow the other kids. And the fourth is the mascot or the clown, and that's somebody who, we've all had in our classrooms that tries to get attention, positive or negative, from being funny. And then in some roles, there's a placater child that just tries to make everybody happy somehow. So we have those roles that we take on. And I don't know if you found that in your home, if you had siblings.
Well, that's the interesting part. See, I'm an only child. But as you were describing those children, I was sort of all of those kids.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what an only does. They play all those roles at some point.
Yeah, that's funny. So how does the alcohol, I've heard the term alcohol gene. Now, I didn't become alcoholic. I don't drink at all at this point. I used to drink a little when I was in my younger days, but these days I just don't drink at all. Tea is the strongest thing I drink. And you don't necessarily become alcoholic because you had an alcoholic parent, right?
No, that's true. You do not. You do have at sometimes a genetic predisposition. And so what that means is they did some studies, I think it was in Sweden, where they took kids that came from an alcoholic home and were adopted into homes as infants, into homes where people didn't drink, and they had a higher rate of alcoholism. So from that, they've said that there's a genetic predisposition that some people become alcoholic. There's a statistic for male children have a 4 times greater chance of becoming alcoholic if their father was an alcoholic. I see a lot of people over 35 years, too, and many of them, like I don't drink that much either. Sometimes I'll have 2 ounces of red wine, that's it, and I'm like, oh, why do people drink this? But anyway, there are most of the people that come here, some of them will smoke pot, So I'll go to pot because nobody in my family abused that, which is the same thing because you become addicted to that. You don't start out addicted, but that's what happens. And we all have other kinds of addictions too. There's food disorders, and daughters of alcoholics have a sweet tooth, which I do have, and I've learned how to moderate that. So there's other addictions that you can have, spending, that kind of stuff. Well, mostly what continues the cycle of addiction is the communication patterns in the home. So we try to change those where people can listen more than talk, because mostly, your dad was quiet, but mostly alcoholics are the ones that have come here, though, that I've seen over 35 years. They're the extroverted, arrogant type of people that know everything, and they lecture you to death. And so, people being raised in that kind of a home don't care for authority, have problems with authority figures, and have a very idealistic outlook on what life should be like, maybe even innocent to the point. But mostly the biggest thing that we want when we come from an alcoholic or dysfunctional home is we want control. And so some people will go to different areas to get control. And you have to learn how to modify that also in coming from one of these families. I do have a list of characteristics, if you'd like me to read them to you, that people have. And I read them to anybody who comes in for the first time and comes from, one of these families, which is what I usually get anyway. Like I have difficulty following projects through from beginning to end. I lie when it'd be just as easy to tell the truth. Because kids, you get in a habit of lying. You lie when you don't even have to.
That's
I judge myself without mercy. I have difficulty having fun. I take myself very seriously. I have difficulty with intimate relationships, and that's a big reason they come when they're adults. I overreact to change beyond my control. I feel different from other people. I'm either super responsible or super irresponsible. I'm extremely loyal, even in the face of evidence that the loyalty is undeserved. And I lock myself into a course of action without giving serious consideration to alternate behaviors or possible consequences. So sometimes they're impulsive. That would be the second child for sure. And then I guess at what normal is, because many times, people talk about, Christmas, the Christmas tree landed out in the lawn and that kind of stuff. So they weren't sure what normal was, how to other people do it, because at our house it was just chaotic.
Yeah, I can see some of those traits in me. I mean, to certain degrees, not extreme, but I think probably the biggest takeaway for me for being a child of an alcoholic parent was, and because being an only child, I really had to rely on myself for emotional support, because while my father was drinking and tuning out the world, my mother had to handle basically everything because he was just incapable of doing. He didn't lose his job, so that was good. He managed to hang on to his job. He managed to keep working. But every second that he was not working, he was drinking.
Right.
And so nothing around the house got done. She had to manage basically everything. She also worked during that time, which was unusual in the early 70s. Most of the women stayed home, but she worked. Right. So I was a latchkey kid. I just remember having to amuse myself in a lot of ways. And I suppose that was probably the reason why I started playing the piano at an early age, because it was there in the house. And once I discovered it, then I just kind of immersed myself into it and, was self-taught for playing piano. So
that's great.
Yeah, I mean, there can be good things to come out of bad, but it's not the road you want to take to get there. Do you know what I mean? It's like I would rather have had a different father and still learn to play the piano, but maybe I wouldn't have. I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe I wouldn't have.
I have a great story to tell about Ronald Reagan, the president, former president, was a son of an alcoholic father. And his mother was very with it. in that she told the boys, he had a brother, and she told the boys that their father had a disease, it wasn't their fault, and, all that stuff. Well, so Ronald Reagan comes to New Jersey, and there's a guy called Riley Reagan in New Jersey, and he's the head of the Division of Alcoholism for the state of New Jersey. And Riley had an alcoholic father, and Riley was a recovering alcoholic, and he'd been in prison also. But right now he's running the Division of Alcoholism, and he was got the honor of being the civil servant of the year that year. So he gets the honor to go pick up President Reagan from the plane and take him to wherever he's supposed to be. So they're driving in the car, and Ronald Reagan's in the back, and he said, I understand, you're the head of the Division of Alcoholism, and my father was an alcoholic. And Riley said, yeah, so was mine. And this always touches me. But Ronald Reagan said, yeah, my brother and I always wondered what we could have been if our father hadn't been an alcoholic.
Yeah. And he was the president of the United States at that point, yeah?
United States, right? So no
Wow.
matter how well people do sometimes, we just don't have the self-esteem that, now, parents are always saying you did a good job and, teaching you this and giving you this class. And, well, when you come from a dysfunctional home where the parents are busy because they have to be, one's overly responsible and one's under-responsible,
right?
Then the kids, they kind of have to do it themselves like you did with the piano.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because you're exactly right about that. One was over-responsible, and we do have to kind of wind this down. What are you working on now? Do you have a book out, or I'm just looking at your bio?
Yes, I have 3 books. In fact, the first one would be for people that are interested in, learning about coming from an alcoholic home, and it's called "You're Not Finished Yet." And it talks in the first chapter. It talks about what is social drinking, what is alcoholism, and the roles, and just a little bit of what we've talked about. I have another book. The second one is called "Grandma, What is a Soul?" And that is about my grandson didn't want me to die. He was 6 years old and talked to me in the car. And so I told him that I wasn't going to die. I wasn't old enough yet. But when I did, when I became, deceased, my soul would come back and watch over him. And then he said, "Grandma, what is a soul?" So I explained what happens when someone dies, where do they go and what happens to them. And there's a section in the back for parents if they want to read that. And then my third book is called The Psychology of the Soul and the Paranormal. And that talks about the vagus nerve, which is your 10th and longest nerve in your body. Comes in at the top of your head, goes around your neck, goes down into your heart and into your stomach. And we can, that nerve, Darwin talked about that in the 1700s. And if somebody has some kind of a problem that they had in childhood, say they were afraid of cats and as a child, and they still are, when they see a cat, their stomach gets upset, tells their brain, danger, danger, and their heart rate goes up, and they start to panic. So what we do now with that vagus nerve is to teach them to breathe. And you breathe in on the count of 4, and then you breathe out 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Longer out breath calms down that stomach and tells the brain there's no reason for you to be upset right now. It's safe right here. So we use that to help people with their triggers for anxiety and panic. But also the vagus nerve is a spiritual component. And when people have out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, and their etheric, a spiritual body leaves their physical body, they go up into that vagus nerve and out into the ether. So I don't know how much your readers or listeners are into near-death experiences, but that's when you'd want to know about this nerve other than panic and anxiety. Okay. And all those books can be ordered through Amazon.
Okay, great. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
I do. In fact, I just had that redone. So it's called Karen E for Edith, my grandmother's name, Herrick, HERRICK.com. Okay. And I'm also on YouTube if they want to listen to my voice teaching different things.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was a nice conversation, and thank you for sharing.
Oh, you're entirely welcome. Enjoyed it very much.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Douglas Coleman's Don't Do a Podcast is a dryly humorous rant about Douglas's pet peeve the unrelenting torrent of podcasts hitting the web on a constant basis. As technology has put podcasting within the reach of anyone, many wholly unqualified people have taken the plunge. This witty polemic tries to persuade them from broadcasting their drivel using Douglas's brand of sarcastic humor. Now on Amazon, only 99 cents.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
Hey, this is Ray Powers. Don't touch anything. You've got it right where you need it. Tuned in to the Douglas Coleman Show. You heard me.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Carolyn C.K. Jones. Hi, Carolyn. How are you?
Great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, international best-selling, multi-award-winning author. How many books have you written now?
2, and an ebook.
Have you been writing your whole life? I guess not for 2 books, right? You must have done something else before.
Well, but I have been writing my whole life, actually. It started in junior high when as a junior in high school, when I showed proficiency at my writing, and I got transferred to the enriched English class, where I did some in-depth studying of writing.
Okay.
And then throughout my career as a nurse, I was a registered nurse for 27 years. And throughout that career, I worked for the government and did some writing of bills and things like that for them and reports to the legislature. And then most recently, I've written all my marketing material and everything in addition to my books.
Oh, okay. Marketing material for what?
For my business, for my coaching and speaking and letting them know about my books.
Oh, well, tell us a little about that. What are you doing with that?
With which? My business or my books?
Just tell us a little about the business, and then we'll switch over and talk about your book.
Okay. Well, I'm everything forgiveness. I'm all about forgiveness. And it started because I spent 30 years myself as an adult being very angry and bitter over my childhood. I drank and drugged over it all because I was so angry until I crashed and burned with my drinking, at which point I got sober. 4 years into it, I discovered a way to forgive my past. And the peace I felt was so immediate and immense that it's something I want to share with others and give others an opportunity to experience themselves. And that's why I started my business, is to pay forward how to forgive so that you can experience peace and freedom. I offer one-on-one coaching, group coaching. I actually have a book club and support group going right now. And I also provide transformational speaking to various groups around in the Bay Area right now, the San Francisco Bay Area. And then I have my books. Oh, I'm also an instructor at the College of Marin here, which is a local college, a 4-year.
What are you instructing?
Forgiveness. What's the name of the class? How to resolve resentment, the art of forgiveness.
Okay. Do you want to talk about your childhood at all? Like what was so bad that happened that turned you...
Well, not really.
Not really.
Except to say that I came away from it with feelings of great shame and worthlessness and a self-esteem that was in the toilet, a confidence level that didn't exist. So that's how I came away from it. It was a very tumultuous childhood. I used to come home from school every night and play Let There Be Peace on Earth on the piano, and I would sing along at the top of my lungs. I did that every day for weeks and weeks because I wanted peace in my life. You know, it took me until I forgave to find that peace. So that was, some 50 years later?
Yeah, I know people. I had a relatively decent childhood, but I've known some people that have had some really horrible experiences, and it does take a long time. Some people never get over it, and they live their whole adult life. But some people finally do sort of reconcile all of the trauma that they went through as a kid and manage to salvage some good years of their life at the end of it. So I'm glad that you were able to do that.
Yeah, me too. And I just to interject really quickly, Douglas, I specialize in people who are still angry or bitter over their childhood.
Oh, okay. All right.
So anyone who's still struggling with that and wants to get beyond it, I'm your person.
Okay.
Been there, done that, and I can get you there.
I'm looking at the titles of your books. Your first book was Opening the Gates of the Heart, A Journey of Healing, and then your second book is The Art of Forgiveness. What's the basic difference between the two books, or is it like part one and part two?
No, they're totally different. Opening the Gates of the Heart is a photograph book that has 82 photos of wrought iron gates and a verse that goes with each image. And I took the gates and the pictures, and I wrote the verses. It's a story, if you will, of my journey from angst, great angst, fear, worthlessness, sorrow, and despair through to serenity and joy and peace. That's how the book ends up. But it's actually like a tribute to the resiliency of the human spirit and the beauty of the human spirit. So, yeah, it's more like a coffee table book.
Okay. And the other one?
You can open the book and each page is sufficient to do a meditation from. So it can be used as a meditation book as well.
It almost sounds like a poetry book, kind of, yeah?
Sort of, yeah. Okay. It won an award for poetry once.
Ah, all right. Okay. And then tell us a little about the other book, the second book.
The Art of Forgiveness starts with the scene and goes through the event that led me to my bottom with my drinking. And that was the rejection from who I thought was the love of my life. So you get to go along with me on that ride. From that point, I talk about how I slipped to the bottom, praying not to die, praying for help because I was drinking so much, and being helped by God, I later realized. And it goes through stages and steps I went through to get from just the worst bottom that you could imagine. I was shattered and devastated. So getting from that point to the point where I live today in a state of gratitude and positivity, it was quite a journey. And within the book, is my yippee method of healing. You see, the art of forgiveness is like a painting. We evolve over time. As our beings evolve over time, and it's just like that with a painting. So that's why I call it the art of forgiveness. Within the art of forgiveness is my healing method, the yippee method. And it's an acronym that stands for yearn, investigate, process, practice, evolve, and empower. So it goes through and looks at your resentments, identifies them with you, and it's a guidance through the process. And I basically hold your hand the whole way through as you're reading the book. You get the sense that I'm right there with you, guiding you to a point of forgiveness.
So the services that you offer are one-on-one or group or both?
Both.
Okay.
The group I have going right now is called CJ's Book Club and Support Group. So what we're doing is we're reading from Opening the Gates of the Heart, one verse at a time, and then having that sparks the discussion. So we're using it like a meditation book in essence.
Oh, I see.
But we're saying out loud what is coming up for us.
Okay. Is this a book, is this a group that is online, or are you doing this in person?
It's online on Zoom.
Okay.
It's a monthly club, and so there is a fee for it, which is $27. And I can give you the site to go to register if anyone might be interested.
Yeah, we'll do that right at the end of the interview. I want to always ask the guests for their websites. So how many people have you helped at this point?
Oh, my, maybe 50.
Okay, quite a few. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is something that you do full-time pretty much?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah. Do you have any other aspirations to do something else, or is this going to be your life calling for now?
This is my life calling, and I feel like I was called because the realization that I had a story that could help others heal, it came to me suddenly in about 2007, and I realized my purpose. Prior to that, immediately prior to realizing my purpose, I was praying to God to let me die, because I thought that the only purpose for my life was to be messed up over things that happened in my childhood.
How long ago did you have the kind of epiphany, if you will, that when you said you hit bottom with the drinking? How long ago was that?
I hit bottom in 2001. I got sober in March of 2001. I forgave my past in 2004. In 2007, I learned the deep meaning of gratitude and how to use it in my life. And then I had that epiphany in 2007 or 8. It came to me what I was supposed to be doing with my life.
Okay. And then did you write the books at that point, or write the first book at that point?
No, the first book, I had no idea I was writing it, and I wasn't intending to write a book. What was happening is, over here, I was photographing wrought iron gates, and I was doing that over here. While over there, I was journaling every day to keep myself sober and sane. And furthermore, I was journaling with my non-dominant hand, which has shown through research that real deep emotions come up through your fingers and flow out on the page, because your whole brain is activated when you write with your non-dominant hand. When you write with your dominant hand, only one half of your brain is active. So I found that really interesting. But anyway, these two tasks activities went along parallel to each other until one day in November of 2004, I wrote in my journal, "I have spent a lifetime spinning webs of terror and shame between the spires that stand as sentinels to my heart."
Oh, that's nice.
I was blown away, Douglas, when I wrote that, because that is not how I speak. And yet, it was me. So what I realized, what I wondered was, do I have other verses that match? Oh, I forgot the most important part. I was so blown away by it because it gave voice to a photo, a gate photo, that I had named Webs of Fear. And I had just named it that about 3 weeks earlier. And now come along these words that further define the photo. So I thought, wow, I wonder if there's other verses in my journals. So I went through my 10 journals at the time, and lo and behold, if there weren't other verses that matched other photos, 3/4 of the 82 photos in the book, their verse came from my journals that were written verbatim before I even saw the gate. But yet, the words described the image. So this was so divinely created. It's got the divine stamped all over it, I think.
We've got time for one more. Do you want to read one more out of your book?
Yes. What do I want to read? Oh, I know what I want to read. You look at the gate, which is closed, and it's all blue-gray because it's patinaed. That is what bronze does and brass does when it turns. And you see 3 gate knobs, 2 on this side of the gate and 1 on the other side. We can see a little bit of it. The knobs on this side of the gate are black and brown. And then the knob on the other side is yellow, brass-colored. And this is titled Cultivation of Differences. We ask, require, demand that those around us be like us, share our attributes, our beliefs. And in so doing, we compare one to another. In that process, do we not squash the spirit of one who is different from us? One whose thoughts and dreams and talents lie in a different place? We are like the gates. Although similar in design, what thrives in one spot does not grow in another. On one, there is rust or corrosion or patina, while on the other is mellowed brass. One is not more beautiful than another. Each has beauty in its own right, if we will only look, if we will only see.
Wow. That's very nice. And that's
Thank you.
And that's from the first book?
Yes, that's from the first book.
Okay. Well, we do have to wrap this up. Give out the website that you were going to give out for your programs, and also one for your books if you've got another one, or if they're all in the same one.
Yeah, I do. Actually, it's the same one to get to my website and to buy the book. You can you go to my website where you can choose to order it directly from Amazon, or you can choose to order it from me and I sign it for you.
Okay.
So that website is www.carolyncjjones.com. And Carolyn is spelled Carolyn, and then CJJONES. There are 2 J's there. The book club, if you're interested in, is CarolynCJJones.com/book-club. We meet from 3 to 4 on Friday afternoon. That's Pacific time. and we meet on Zoom. So as soon as you register for this, you get sent the Zoom link, and then we meet in the room.
That's great. And you said you do that once a week?
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your story and sharing your writing. Very good.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Douglas.
And best of luck with everything you're doing.
Okay, thank you very much.